This will be a trek that will challenge your strength, endurance, route finding, and courage, but will also reward your senses and desire to follow a path rarely traveled. A journey that truly belongs on your life list of places to explore. We start at the Section 3 Lake Trailhead here and follow Trail 1130 through sparse meadows to the base of Bear Creek Mountain at 2.7 miles. From here, the Spur Trail takes you straight up the mountain on a trail that more closely resembles a game trail to the summit. Look for a summit register here, and after signing, strike out southeast along the ridge, keeping to the top, and follow it all the way to striking Devil's Horn at mile 5.2, a red rock conglomerate that rises high along the ridge, an unmistakable landmark that reminds you of a large termite mound one might find in the Australian outback, only on a much grander scale. It's easy to see why it got its name, a large red horn on the otherwise brown and black rock of the area. Watch your footing as you find a way around its head wall, a vertical red wall that you will have to skirt. The rock here is like concrete, and loose rock that sits on top act like marbles scattered across the dance floor. Continue along the ridge southeast, and you will come to a saddle with a small meadow, a grassy prominence at mile 6.4, that allows you good sight lines back towards Devil's Horn and forward towards your destination at the base of Gilbert Peak. Stay to the southern shoulder of Titan Peak and continue along this rocky prominence, and as you round the ridge that has been blocking your view up the Conrad Creek drainage, a whole new world enters into view. There, below you, is a grass-lined valley with Conrad Creek running through its middle. Small groups of firs dot the edges of this verdant valley before it runs out into the barren slopes of the ridges that form this valley on either side. A huge hanging waterfall can be seen cutting through the trees, and you can hear it pounding over a cliff, backdrop music to go with what your eyes see. We could spot a large herd of elk and mountain goats from this perch along the ridge, sharing the wealth of this hidden valley. Follow the creek uphill with your gaze, and you will see the blue ice of Conrad Glacier, bunched up at the steep cliffs of Gilbert Peak, high point in the Goat Rocks. Swirling clouds hiding the very tip of the peak only lent to the mystical sight of this valley, seeming too impossible to be true, as if you just wandered onto a movie's fantasy set. We drop down into this incredible place, down to the grassy meadows, and follow the creek upstream to our destination for the night at Cold Lake, 8.48 miles in. The only place that its name can be found is in old guidebooks and from local yore. A nice sandy beach awaits us here on its shore, and our footprints are the only ones we can see, as if we've journeyed to some faraway destination in a lost mountain range. It makes for a fantastic campsite, where we can watch the sun go down on the craggy, ice-covered peaks of the Goat Rocks. Day 2. Cloudless skies in the morning highlight the endless features of the Goat Rocks, renewing our picture-taking frenzy from the day before. Today is another big day with lots to see and ground to cover, so from the lake's edge, hike up to the next saddle along the ridge here through a vibrant purple field of lupin in full bloom. Their sweet scent will fill your nostrils as you ascend to the saddle. Once here, you can now look north to what awaits, and at first glance it seems daunting to say the least. Below you is a wide snowfield to the steep ridge on the other side, all in the shadow of the jagged black rock peaks of the Goat Rocks, walling in the end of the valley, like the stony parapets of long-forgotten castles. Farther north, you can see the spiky tip of Ives Peak along the ridge, then Old Snowy, and in the distance rising far above it all is Mount Rainier. Drop down into the valley, cross the snowfield, and find a good route up to the opposite ridgeline at 1.8 miles and 7,300 foot elevation. It's steep, and the rocks and sand want to slide sometimes, but still no special equipment required other than determination. Once on top of the ridge, it now looks like a straightforward trek along the ridge to Ives Peak, but you will have to scramble over large boulders and scree to keep along the ridge. At 2.92 miles, you come up to the southern edge of Ives Peak, and you can see that it's too steep to scramble up. In fact, we had to find a safe way across the large boulder field at its southern flank, then up an extremely steep snowfield to reach the ridgeline that runs out west from Ives Peak. Watch your footing here on the rock field, as on more than one occasion, as we were up high on it, one rock would shift underfoot, threatening to dislodge the rocks above, like pulling an orange out of the bottom of the display at the grocery store. We headed down to the base of the snowfield where the runout was at a lesser angle and kick-stepped our way straight up the snow. On top of this ridge at 3 miles in, you can now head back towards the ridge, and as you do, you'll see a faint climber's path that leads up the north side of Ives Peak, a doable scramble up the north side. Keeping to the ridge, you come to another large prominence at 3.5 miles that we had to drop lower on the west side to get around it, continuing to side hill on loose scree and rock. Below, here on the west side of the ridge, you can look down onto the PCT. We finally reach a narrow flat saddle on the southern flank of Old Snowy at 3.9 miles before beginning a final steep ascent along this part of the Goat Rocks. Near the top of the ridge, you can see a natural arch, a little taller than a normal door. After passing through this small arch, you can see the true summit of Old Snowy across another snowfield, gained after hiking up along the ridge for a few minutes more. After taking your hero pick at the summit, mile 4.17 and 78.88 foot of elevation, head down the northern flank of Old Snowy to rejoin the PCT at 4.35 miles, which will be a welcome relief to feet and ankles that have been climbing and side-hilling over rough terrain for the last several miles. This section of the trail is the fabled knives edge of the PCT, where the trail walks along the top of the narrow ridge that leads down from Old Snowy, north for 2 miles to Elk Pass. The remains of McCall Glacier are on the west side of the ridge, and you can look down the upper lake creek drainage all the way down to Packwood Lake. The east side is the McCall Glacier, and both look more like permanent snowfields than glaciers. Still, the views along this section of trail are wide open across open terrain to the nearby ridge lines and peaks. Look for mountain goats again here. We noted 2 small herds. At Elk Pass at 6.4 miles, the rock here is an orangish red, different than the light brown along the knife's edge, and the PCT goes a bit further north before rounding a knob and heading down into a valley below. Even though we've been following an established trail for hours now, our feet call it a day at 7.5 miles in a small meadow with a tarn. It's an obvious layover point, for fresh water runs downhill in a small stream nearby, and there are obvious campsites here near the tarn, a good place to stop for the night, even though the original plan was to stay in McCall Basin. The long up and down along the ridge have taken their toll for the day. Day 3. A beautiful sunrise awaited us, and after marveling at the colors, we make the long trek back to the trailhead. 14.83 miles to be exact, and most of the way is in the trees with little to see as we make our way down to the North Fork of the Titan River. We reach the bottom at 8.4 miles and turn right on the trail number 1118, and this too is easy to follow to the banks of the river. This is a river crossing, as there is no bridge or convenient log to cross, so you'll have to wander the banks a bit to find a good place to ford. From the river's banks, the trail gets a bit hard to follow, as it traverses marshy areas, and in a couple places the trail is washed out from a previous torrent. Once out of the marsh area, the trail keeps to the ridge a little higher up for a while, making it easier to follow, and it's not a bad trek until it starts uphill at 10.62 miles. Now, it's a mindless slog uphill for the next 3.4 miles, gaining 2,730 feet of elevation, over trail that at times is non-existent or simply a game trail. I'm not going to lie, this wasn't fun at all, and it was a mental as well as physical hardship to continue to urge the body onwards, but putting one leg in front of the other, the prize of reaching the top is finally gained. Once you finally top out, it's an easy leg back to the parking lot to end this incredible journey over the best the Goat Rocks has to offer.